Right, we have to tackle the fact that the dollar has weakened considerably, gone close to 96. And that's going to be our first global cue to parse this morning after the markets return to normal trading. I think the rupee smelt that yesterday, and we saw that 0.5% rally in the rupee even on Tuesday. But let's invite Mitul Kotecha, the senior EM strategist at TD Securities. Good morning, Mitul. Here's wishing you a very happy 2019. This dollar weakness, what is the reason for this dollar index weakness, and what might it spell for the rupee?
Sure. Good morning. Happy New Year to you as well. Well, look, I mean, I think the dollar weakening trend is due to a number of factors. Firstly, the market has pared back expectations of Fed interest rate hikes. Growth worries in the U.S. have been increasing, and worries about momentum of growth this year continue to intensify. On top of that, of course, there's a stalemate with regard to the impasse between the Congress and President Trump, and that's led to the government shutdown, and worries about that have intensified. Of course, you have trade concerns still that linger, in particular, obviously, between the U.S. and China. So when you add all of this up, clearly the dollar perspective is becoming weaker. In particular, I think the growth concerns are really on top of the list here. And a lot of these now suggest that the dollar might continue to weaken in the months ahead.
Okay, but what is the message generally for an EM market investor? Usually a dollar weakness brings in money into emerging markets, or should we read it as overall global weakness and therefore risk off for EMs?
Yeah, I think it has elements of both. I mean, I think for EM, the fact that the dollar is weaker is a silver lining for sure. And, as you mentioned, the rupee has benefited from this quite significantly. Although I think for the rupee, you have also lower oil prices helping significantly as well for rupee's prospects. But at the same time, as you note very clearly, that the external and global environment is not so great for EMs, slowing global growth, potentially slowing U.S. growth. All bode badly generally for emerging market assets. Now, our biggest concern is more on trade-orientated countries, which again, when you look from India's perspective, India is not so much a trade-orientated economy, and therefore the fact that it is more closed means that the rupee may at least suffer less than some of the other emerging market currencies.
Mitul, the rupee has, appreciated very, very handsomely. We're back sub-70 now. Is this looking sustainable to you, given the dollar's trajectory, and what kind of a band would you give to the Indian currency?
Yeah, I mean, I would argue that gains are going to be more limited from here for the rupee. I think we've probably now priced in a lot of this good news, and I think certainly when you look going forward, a stronger rupee is also not going to be particularly helpful for India's growth or India's exports. I would imagine that we're not going to see gains much beyond this sort of 68, 69 level for the rupee. And I would think going further along, even with a weaker dollar, dollar INR does move higher back towards the sort of 73, 74 levels as we go into the next few months. So again, I think it's probably a temporary gain, but markets are going to be looking at a number of factors in India, including the elections this year as potential source of uncertainty for India's rupee as well.
Okay, well, finally, should we take any negative cues for inflows into EMs or positive cues? I mean, we've got a fairly decent bond yield in India and a stable rupee. So should we assume that there will be more FII flows, equities or debt?
Well, I think last year was a pretty bad year for inflows into emerging markets, and including India in particular. Things improved towards the end of last year. I expect some of that to continue in the next few months. I think investors in Q1 are going to reallocate some assets, and EM countries, as I said, that are less trade-orientated, that offer higher yields, attractive bond markets, as you mentioned, for rupee yields, debt yields are pretty good. I think that will still see some inflows into India's markets.
All right, we'll leave it at that. Mitul, thank you very much and have a great 2019 again.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. On that note, it's time to now drill it down to the micros. We've got our entire team standing by with the CNBC TV 18 top 10 stock list of the morning. Let's start with Anuj. Anuj, now that we'll get more participation back, what's the stock on your radar?
I'll tell you one thing. I have a sense that the market somehow had an information about this MSME thing. All the PSU banks actually ended at the highest point. I mean, not even 5 or 10 paise off the highest point. So a lot of that news might be, or some of that might be priced in. So perhaps you don't want to chase any kind of gap up on PSU banks. Looking at the market and the screen, just look at what the last hour saw on the PSU bank index. And in that, I think SBI for me is interesting because while this was yesterday's news, today's news is the fact that Jet Airways has delayed interest payment to banks. Now, I'll tell you something, Jet Airways, the SBI is the lead banker, and Jet Airways has massive debt on its books. Frankly speaking, it's, your questions must be asked on Jet Airways as well. But, right now it's just delay. That's what they're saying. But the market will think. I think it's a large loan. And that's something that I think would bother the market. So just be, cautious of SBI, I think. Raymond is the other one I'm watching out for. First signs of long unwinding and it's facing some resistance at its 200-day moving average. So, again, not a high conviction one, but perhaps, you would want to keep an eye on this one.
Okay. I'll just take the positive from the MSME announcement.
It's positive, of course, but just how much is in the price is the only point.
I completely take your point on that. I wouldn't be able to tell you about the technical position on the stocks, but for the banks themselves, it's going to be a positive. I'll just throw a little bit of numbers, which I said earlier. It's about all the total exposure of the banking sector to MSME loans below 25 crore is placed between 10 and 15%. I didn't get a very specific number. Most of the Reserve Bank, the Financial Stability Report didn't have that number. Assuming it's between 10 and 15 lakh crore and 10% of that could have become NPA, what banks have saved is a potential 1 lakh crore of NPAs, which they can, if at all, have to recognize only in FY22. So that's a major relief for the moment, and therefore it's positive for banking P&Ls.
Sure.
Stocks, we'll leave it to the market.
We'll have to see how that plays out. But the other big theme of the morning is going to be this all-round slowdown in the auto sector that we've seen. Nimesh, good morning. iSure, and I was looking at CV sales from Tata Motors. It's not looking too good.
That's right. So, the big headline from the auto sales number which have been reported so far is clearly there is moderation across the board, whether it's two-wheelers, four-wheelers, heavy commercial vehicles, all have seen reported disappointing numbers. I'll start with iSure Motors first because the Royal Enfield numbers came post-market. So, this is the biggest stock which will react today on the back of numbers. It reported sales of 58,000 units, way below Nomura estimate of 73,000 units, and it was down almost 13% YOY. So, this is one stock which will get clearly impacted. I am told this is not a one-off number. So this is not because of a shutdown that these numbers have been lower. It's a genuine slowdown, and there is a lot of inventory in the system. So clearly this will not go well with the street. Across the board, I've seen EPS cut coming in for iSure Motors. Not only that, now for the full year volume estimate also has been cut by across the board brokerages. So there has been a cut off. So Motilal has put out a note saying that they're cutting the volume estimate to 8.4 lakh units versus 8.92 lakh units for FY19. And for FY20, 9.19 units versus 10.08 lakh units. So clearly there is a cut in terms of full year estimates in terms of volumes. Even the EPS has been cut by close to 6 to 9% for FY19 and FY20 by Motilal. So iShare is a big stock that will get reacted today on the back of these numbers. Tata Motors, the other number which came post markets yesterday, December auto sales, December total sales were 54,000, down 10% YOY. And it was much lower, it was lower than the Nomura estimates as well. So, in fact, the company has gone on and said that higher interest rates and rising costs has impacted the December sales. So, these are the two numbers to watch out because they came post-markets. If you look at all the numbers which came yesterday, Motilal has cut the EPS target for both iShare Motors and Maruti.
Okay. No, this is a huge thing, and I don't think anybody saw it coming, this kind of a slowdown.
Yeah.
Yes. It was insurance payment and other kinds of one-offs, but now it looks like the slowdown is worse than we thought. Well, I just want to revisit what we discussed with Mitul Kotecha. The rupee was stronger by 0.5% yesterday. If you looked at it from its October lows, the rupee is 7% stronger. So maybe today there'll be a sentimental negative for IT stocks.
Sentiment negative for IT stocks is something that we'll watch out for. Some metal stocks in focus, Nigel?
That's right, Anuj. NMDC, the core business isn't doing well. Remember, the key triggers are reopening of the Donamalai mine. And the second factor is, in fact, pricing. Yesterday, there was a price cut in Odisha. So both those two not looking great. But the stock could open up in the green. Why? Because they are going to be considering a buyback on Jan 8th. That's in the next week itself. Remember, the net worth is around 26,000 crores odd. So if they go for a 10% buyback, that'll be nearly around 2,600 crores. This is primarily to fill the government's kitty because they have a 72% stake in the company. Insurance companies have nearly around 15%. So NMDC may be a mild green tick, though in fact business on the whole is not looking good. Then we shift focus to Coal India. Over there, the dispatch as well as the production numbers did see a bit of a degrowth. So that's not great news, though valuation-wise, downside could be protected at some point of time. And finally, we're looking at MOIL as well. Everyone's talking about steel prices moving lower. Manganese ore, that's a raw material for steel. If steel prices are cracking, we expect the raw material prices as well to be under some pressure. And MOIL as well, they have cut prices effective yesterday itself. For this stock as well, they have cash balance, and valuation-wise as well, it should get some kind of support. But otherwise, negative for Coal India and MOIL.
Okay, so not too much of great news for a lot of these commodity stocks this morning. Thanks, Nigel, for that. Speaking of not such great news, Jet Airways has not been able to meet its payment commitments to banks as on the 31st of December. Anisha has the details on this one. Anisha.
Well, yes, Ruby, morning. And yes, the problems continue for Jet Airways. As you mentioned, they informed the exchanges yesterday that they have not been able to meet the payment obligations, whether interest or principal payments to their lenders as of 31st December 2018. And these lenders were headed by a consortium led by State Bank of India. Now, they have not explicitly mentioned the amount that they were not able to meet. But do remember, as of June 2018, they had a gross debt of around 8,600 crores. And add to that the trade payables, the total amount outstanding was close to around 12 to 14,000 odd crores. So it's a sizable sum, and that's the reason perhaps the banking stocks might also take a knock along with Jet Airways. It's no secret that they have been cash strapped. They have not been paying their pilots as well. So another downtick coming for Jet Airways today.
Okay, Anisha, thanks a lot for that. Yes, that's something we'll keep on our radar for sure. Ekta, some news on Glenmark Pharma?
Yes, well, they have completed the transfer of their API business to a wholly owned subsidiary. Remember that as of Q2 FY19, the company in the conference call said that they are currently in discussions for selling a minority stake in the API business. So this kind of restructuring of the transfer of the business to a wholly owned subsidiary is probably in step with that kind of stake sale that we could probably expect from the company. Remember, the API business has around 100 products, around 14% of sales. As of first half, it was up 4.5% on a year-on-year basis.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Ekta, very much for that. So let's quickly recap our top list of stocks this morning. Stocks that have positive news flow surrounding them today are Escorts, NMDC, Glenmark Pharma, PNB, Bank of India and Bank of Baroda. This, of course, on the MSE relaxation that's come in. Stocks with negative news flow are SBI, Raymond, Eicher Motors, Tata Motors, M&M Maruti, Coal India, MOIL, Jet Airways, and also IT names like Infosys, Wipro and TCS.
Okay, let's scratch this point a bit more about the Reserve Bank allowing that one-time restructuring of medium and small units or loans to medium and small units that don't exceed 25 crore rupees. They are not currently in default, but as of Jan 1, they should be standard. Only then this forbearance is applicable. The move comes after the Reserve Bank board nudged the central bank to provide some relief to small and medium enterprises. To analyze the impact on this, we spoke to Rajneesh Kumar, Chairman of State Bank of India. Here's a bit of what he told us yesterday.
State Bank of India, we already have a restructuring scheme for MSMEs for loan up to 25 crore. The only thing new is that right now when we do the restructuring, we classify it as substandard, or whatever is the asset class. If it is a standard, it becomes substandard. Or otherwise, if it is, say, D1 or substandard D2, that asset classification continues. And you have to make provision also. When we talk about MSME and 15%, there may be very low-value loans also, which are generally government-sponsored schemes and all that. But in this segment, the percentage may be still around 8 to 10%. But this segment which we are talking about, say, 1 crore to 25 crore, this segment, if this relaxation which has come, so maybe some accounts, they will be restructured. It will become an incentive to lenders to have a more pragmatic approach And because the provisioning requirement will be higher and the account will not be classified as NPA, so I think this is this takes into account both the concerns. One is that as far as estimated losses are concerned, if the restructuring fails, then bank has already provided. We have been working on this scheme for last 2 years.
All right. So that's the State Bank chairman saying that it's much needed. Let's check out what the numbers will look like on the P&L. We have Anil Gupta of ICRA joining us. Anil, good morning. Thank you very much. Any idea what would be the total banking sector exposure to loans like these under 25 crore given to MSMEs?
Yeah, hi, good morning. See, total credit from the banking sector to MSME loans for MSME sector should be close to around 10 lakh crores. Apart from there should be additional 2 lakh crores from the NBFCs also. And under this dispensation, which has been there since, I think, January of 2018, where the RBI gave first forbearance that the GST-registered MSMEs could be having a relaxation up to 180 days in terms of classification of NPA. So since then, we have been tracking these numbers, like how much dispensation has been availed across various banks. So that number is not quite large as of now, and it is less than 10,000 crores across all the banks. But with this circular in place, because earlier the June circular talked about that this the forbearance will reverse by May of 2019. So the banks were required to revert back to 90-day NPA norms by May 2019. So possibly the incentive for the borrower as well as the lender for a longer term restructuring was not there. But with this guideline,
It is only 10,000 crore, you think, by way of NPAs. Would not more people avail of it and more potential NPAs be saved?
Yeah. So 10,000 crores is the number which is currently not classified NPA and currently under dispensation.
Got it.
But with this circular in place, now the borrowers which are, let's say, 30 plus or 60 plus overdue will now the benefit of this scheme, apply for a restructuring, try to take a longer tenor repayment schedule with some moratorium on interest servicing also.
Okay.
So there is a likelihood that this number will eventually go up, because the scheme talks about that the implementation of restructuring can be done till March of 2020. So a borrower which is, let's say, which becomes overdue in the month of, let's say, Q1 or Q2 can also basically add up to the overall restructuring number by March 2020.
Anil, a simple question. We've got veterans of the sector like Mr. Uday Kotak almost a year back pointing out whether there is sort of stress really building up in the MSME sector and the need to be far more granular with due diligence as well on these loans. Now, with this, ease coming in from the RBI as well, simple question. Is this kind of papering over what could start becoming a festering problem? Or, that's just, taking things too far right now, getting over worried?
No, definitely. Such a forbearance will definitely spoil the credit culture, because earlier the borrowers were sticking to their repayment schedule. Now with this forbearance, definitely any borrower will come forward and try to get a restructuring with a longer repayment schedule. So overall, it will be not a good for the credit culture for the borrowers.
Okay. There is, since we have you with us, what's your take on this 59-minute loan? Will that also, will that open the door to too many loans which can go bad, or is that actually a safer way to give MSME loans?
Yeah, so it all depends on how you collateralize and how you securitize the loan. See, the RBI Financial Stability Report talks much about the MSME loan this time. And if you look distribution,
they're overly distributed at the PCA, PSU banks. I agree with you.
The level of NPAs. So it all depends on how you collateralize the loan, what is the repayment schedule you fix. So it is not a bad asset class in terms of risk and reward ratio, but it depends on how you collateralize the loan.
Anil, since you've been studying, how banks have availed the earlier relaxation, the dispensation given by RBI, can you share any names with us? Which are the banks that are likely to benefit the most? Because now they don't have to classify this as NPA. Whose exposure is maximum to MSMEs?
See, we have seen banks if you talk about the dispensation amount which was available in the September results. So for a large bank like State Bank of India, the amount was not very large, less than around 1,000 crores. Whereas we saw some of the small banks, like with the loan book of less than lakh crores also, having a number closer to SBI. So it all depends on the follow-up which the branch does with the borrowers. We saw a significant decline between the June results and the September results. So the one of the banks had the dispensation amount with the borrowers closing to around 800 crores on a balance sheet of 50,000 crores, which declined to less than 60 crores in one quarter. So it depends on how the branch follow up.
Okay, fair enough. And just a final question to you. There is this 59-minute loan, there are the Mudra loans, and there is this forbearance, following up on an earlier forbearance. This is not a small amount of money, 10 lakh crore if you say is the exposure to MSME, and you have so many schemes. In course of time, will it become a systemic problem? Like, some 2-3 lakh crore turning out as NPAs, maybe a year down the line, 2 years down the line, or are we worrying too much?
No, I think definitely it is not good from the credit culture, and it should. I think the number should go up. It all depends on how the banks educate the borrowers to not to avail these schemes for their long-term benefits. But I think the number should go up significantly. Whether it will touch a lakh crore, it is very difficult to say.
All right, we'll leave it at that. Anil Gupta, thank you very much for putting some numbers and some understanding into what the RBI announced yesterday for MSMEs.